Here is my base image that I started with, generated with AI, and I had to work on the prompts to get my vision and story coming together. What I love about the image, to me, it has an emotive feeling. I love the complementary colours, and I will talk about colours later. It's got the bones for me to work with. But with this image, I felt like playing, being creative. I didn't want to start a composite from scratch. I didn't want to have to cut out or put images together. I felt like playing. And that's what I'll encourage you to do. Sometimes an image doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be this major production. It can be just as something simple of playing with colour and tones to tell a story, explore your imagination, and also develop your colour eye. Let's talk colour. Look at the image. Is it predominantly blue or cool tones to you? Is it predominantly the warmer tones with the oranges and the tans? For my eye, it's like a balance. It's got a lovely depth of blue in there. It's got those orange and tan and ochre colours coming through. It's about understanding the colour wheel in a simple term. If you look at the colour wheel that I've got on the screen now, blue is a primary colour. So with a primary colour, what would be a secondary colour that I could work with? If I go straight across to the secondary or a complementary colour, it would be in those warm tones. And you can see in the warm tones, you've got an orange red, an orange and a yellow orange. So sometimes when I'm struggling with colour, I will look at what is the primary colour. So for example, if it was more in the warm tones, I would then go across the colour wheel and say, well, I need blue to counterbalance, to give it a contrast. That is what I put in my prompt. I asked for specific colours. So I said primary colour would be blue and a complementary colour would be in the orange tones. And so when I'm working with my prompts, I'm very specific with what I want, but I also want certain colours. Now what I'm going to do is show you how I worked with 3 adjustment layers to get the colour tones that I wanted for this vintage emotive image. And remember, I didn't want it to be a major production. I just wanted to play. Let's look at the layer stack and see the adjustment layers that I've used. I've used a levels, I've used a photo filter, and I've used a black and white adjustment layer. Why did I use those adjustment layers? Let me explain. When I look at the image, I'm happy with the tones, but it needs a little bit of lift. And I find if I do brightness and contrast, it doesn't work for me. It makes it too contrasty, too bright. So I tend to go to levels first up as my first adjustment layer. I'm going to turn that layer on, and you can see it's given what I call a lift. It's lightened it. It's given a little bit more tonal range with a bit of brightness. Levels tends to be my go-to, but for some people it can be curves, for some people it's brightness and contrast. It depends whether you're working with AI images or whether you're working with photos. But for this, I wanted the levels just to give it a light lift. Let's open up the properties and see what I've done with it. My first go-to is auto, and I'll see what happens with that. If I don't like that, then I'll play with the mid-tones. Generally, I go to the mid-tones and I'll slide it left or right. So if I go to the right, it deepens it. If I go to the left, it gives it a little bit more lift. And this is where you start to develop your colour eye and your personal style. We all see colour differently, and this is why doing an image like this can help you. Why do I say that? Playing equals learning. If you're creating your images to rules constantly, you're stifling your creativity. But just playing for the sake of playing and creating something can upskill your skills, can also give you a sense of accomplishment by just playing and seeing what you can achieve. Adding the levels is just what I call that base start, just gets my image tonally working together, brightness and the colour. Now what I want to do is try a technique that sometimes is a go-to for me, and it's the photo filter. And why do I choose this? It's about adding a hint of blue or green or yellow, whatever the colour is that you choose, to that image. It's like when you're working with paint, if you have a colour underneath and you put another colour over the top, it changes the colours underneath. And so when you're adding adjustments like the photo filter, or you could use presets or a colour lookup, or working with curves and channels, it will impact on the colours underneath that layer. Let me explain. I'll turn the layer on, and this is the photo filter. I'll turn it off and on. Very subtle. But let's have a look at what I've got. Blend mode, normal. Opacity, 100%. So I haven't dialed it down or changed with a blend mode. I'm going to open up the properties panel, and you can see it's cyan and it's on 17, the density. But if I click here, you've got choices. So you've got a violet, you've got magenta, you've got sepia. That is like putting a colour wash over the colours underneath. Let me explain. What I've chosen is cyan, but if I come up and change it to another colour, what happens to the tones or the colours underneath? Let's click magenta. Now I'm getting some of those pink tones coming through, and I'm going to leave it the same density. Let's change that and add a deep yellow. It's impacting the colours underneath. If I come up and choose red, that is also changing the tonal range. If I bump that up to, let's say, 47%, let's turn that layer off and on. What it's shifted into is not so much the blue, it's adding red and changing the depth and tones of the colours underneath. I'm going to come back, choose cyan, dial it back down to 17 because I only want a hint of that cyan coming through. Now you can see the difference when I bump that cyan right up into the 71. I'm getting strong cyan blue. It's impacting the colours underneath, the skin tone, the blue, also the depth within the flowers. But we'll come back, change it to 17, and let's move on with the next layer where I thought I'm going to play. I'm going to experiment and see what I can do. And I used Nik Analog Effects, and I love the plugin. It has so many filters in it that you can work with, and it can just change your image. Sometimes in my workflow, I get to a point where I think, am I done? Am I finished? Does it need any more? Do I add a texture? I often get asked, how do you know when the image is finished? And I'll say, how long is a piece of string? You know when it speaks to you, particularly for me, I look at it and I go, I'm happy with it. I looked at this image and I thought, I'm happy with the colours. Do I need to do any more? Do I need to get rid of some distractors? But I felt there was something missing. And that's when I think, well, I'm going to play again and see what I can create. And the next layer that I'm going to show you is where I use Nik Analog Double Exposure. I'll turn the layer on so you can see what I mean. And there it is. It then spoke to me. It added another layer of emotion for me, another layer of depth to storytelling. And what I'm going to do is show you the technique at the end of this. I'm happy with it. But then I looked closer and I saw these eyelashes that were on the cheeks, and I went, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to do a stamp visible layer, Control-Alt-Shift-E, And then what I'm going to do is use the remove tool and I get rid of those eyelashes. Am I happy with it? Yep. But what I'm going to do as a finishing touch is use the black and white adjustment layer. And I'm using this in my workflow a lot more these days. I'll turn the layer on. Look at the change in the colours. I'll turn it off. I get excited with colours. So I'm looking at this now and thinking, this is what I love, the vintage muted tones. To me, it's got the depth of the blue coming through. It's still got the warmth of the complementary colours. What did I do on this layer? I'm going to open up the properties and have a look. I've set the preset at red filter. If you look at the reds, I've dialed it to the right. I've given it a little bit of the yellow. Sometimes what I will do, and I'll just come back and just change to default. I'll click on here. I'll choose default. And you can see now it's changed the tones. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll hit Auto and let's see what it does. If I want to be a little bit more specific, I could work with the sliders, with the reds and the yellows. I could come up here and choose a filter, and you'll get different effects using these different filters. So I'm going to go and choose a red filter, and I'm going to leave it as is. I find now that I just get a different color feel, a softness of color, but I still have the depth by using this technique. I'll add a link at the end of this video where I've done a video on using the black and white adjustment layer for color grading. Now am I finished? I'm going to turn the last layer on, and guess what? That's my last layer. All I wanted to do was play, experiment. No major production, not thinking too hard, not working to rules. It was just getting lost, playing with colour and my imagination. What I'm going to do is show you the technique that I used for the double exposure in Nik Analog. Let's play. I've opened up Nik Analog, and this is where I'm going to play with the double exposure filter. I'm going to come over to the left and I'm going to click on the tab Double Exposure. And this is where I play, I experiment. I'll click on this one. Do I like it? No, I'll click on another one. So let's go in and see what we can do. That could work. I'm going to click on this filter and let's see what that does. Changes it completely. Oh, I do like that. But I find that the distractor on the face of the branch doesn't work, so let's move on. I'll go to another one and see what it does. That can work. What I'll do is click on this one, and this is where I start to play and go, what can I do with this? I'll go here, I'll click on that one, see what it does on the change. That could work. Again, it's about playing and experimenting, having no expectation. I'll go and click on this image, and then I'll think, does that work for me? Let's come back up here and see with this first one. This is the one that I chose. As soon as I saw it, I went, yes, that speaks to me. Why? To me, it added depth, a double dimension to the story, and it accentuated that woman's face. And to me, it showed the emotion of pain, sorrow, or sadness. I'll come over to the right-hand side and just point out a few of the tools that you've got here that you can play with. You can add a brightness, a contrast. You can change your blur strength, boost highlights. You can also come in here and add different light leaks that gives it different tones. You've got film types which can change the tones on your image. This is why I like Nik Collection 8. And I'll leave a link in the description. Here is my finished image. 3 adjustment layers. I added a Nik 8 analog layer to get that double exposure. The main reason that I'm sharing this video with you is a couple of the techniques that I used. but more importantly, to play, experiment with color. Even though you don't want to do something that's a little bit more detailed as a composite, cut out elements, work out a background. And by creating an image like this or something similar, just for enjoyment, have fun, see what you can experiment with different techniques, work with color. It's all about having fun. And isn't that why we create art or take photos? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, hit subscribe and like. And if you like more creative tools, you'll find my color grading tools at Sandra D Imagery.